I am a red-tailed hawk. A very common species of hawk, nothing exotic. Red-tails tend to live in woods near an open field or meadow. We hunt best that way, by sitting on a tree branch, gazing across the field, spotting prey, then swooping in quickly for the kill. That's what I do. I live in the trees near a very nice meadow. Unfortunately, the hunting has been bad lately. Partially that's just the way it goes. There are good times and bad times in the predator business. Of course, since Obama's been in office, bailing out all the high-end predators like cougars and wolves, we smaller predators have to suffer tax hikes. A fucking predatory recession, man. I say we birds of prey march on Wall Street. Who's with me?
It shows us all the places that we want to go and look. Superbook!
Our story begins with Tobias feeling sorry for himself, namely because another hawk has entered his territory and is eating his food. As Tobias rightfully points out, he could morph just about anything and take this new hawk out, but he can't. Because Tobias is feeling sorry for himself, namely because another hawk has entered. Yeah, you see where this is going. The only real prey in Tobias's field is a family of rabbits, but every time Tobias tries to swoop in for the kill, he suddenly imagines himself in the terrified prey's position, which causes Tobias to hesitate and crash and burn. Things are only made worse when Rachel catches Tobias eating a bit of roadkill, which Tobias tries to cover up by pretending to be some random wild hawk. This book largely deals with the issue of Tobias' identity, whether he sees himself as a hawk or a human. This is the first proper book with him as narrator since he regained his morphing abilities, so it makes sense to focus on that now that Tobias has the ability to take both. The sad truth in Tobias' situation is that his life isn't all that fundamentally different for him either way. His situation with a hawk invading his territory is all very reminiscent to how Tobias was bullied in school prior to becoming an Animorph, and his trying not to lose face in front of Rachel is very much a human reaction. It'll always be questionable as to whether Tobias purposely got himself trapped in a hawk or not, but either way, it's clear that, even with the ability to fly, there's no real glory in the life of a hawk compared to that of a human. This is all very interesting, so it sucks how little I care. This is also our first Tobias book since Megamorphs 2, the book where Tobias commits genocide. I found it more than sickly amusing that Tobias should get all strung up over eating a rabbit when he very recently destroyed an entire civilization of peace-loving alien crabs, not to mention all the dinosaurs, without the slightest hint of remorse. Why should he imagine himself in his lunch's position, but not bother imagining himself in the position of the Makora? Families huddled close together, parents trying to calm their children as fiery death rains down upon them, all because Tobias was an asshole. This is what I mean by the term character assassination in my Megamorphs 2 review. Why should I care if Tobias looks cool or not in front of Rachel? Why should I care that Tobias is too much of a coward to fight off the bird that's invading his tiny patch of land? That guy fucked up worse than any human being in history, and there doesn't have the slightest bit of remorse over it. I really want to get into Tobias' story. I really want to care, because this book is well written, but they've made it so difficult. Anyway, Tobias flies to Rachel's house that night. We learn that Tobias will occasionally fly over and do Rachel's homework for her, which makes her winning that award for good grades back in number 13 The Change pretty damn deceitful. But I guess it goes along with the idea presented in Megamorphs 1 The Andalite's Gift that Tobias has been self-educating himself since getting trapped. Rachel tells Tobias that Chapman approached Melissa in school and asked her about Tobias, asked her if she had seen him recently. It seems that a lawyer named DeGroat is looking for Tobias because he has Tobias's father's last will and testament that is to be read on Tobias's birthday. Also, a woman named Arya has come to town claiming to claiming to be Tobias' cousin, and she wants to take him in. Well, that puts Tobias in a situation, doesn't it? Chapman's involvement means this could possibly be a York plot, though to what end remains unclear. In any case, Tobias decides he needs to figure out what this is all about, so Tobias morphs human and goes to de Groot's law office while the Animorphs plant themselves around the building in case anything goes down. De Groot seems friendly, which means nothing. Tobias, where have you been staying? Your legal guardians both seem to think the other one had you. Not a question I want to answer. I'll take care of myself. De Groot smiled. Oh, no doubt. But you are underage. You can't take care of yourself. Not legally. This would be the point that I figured out that de Groot was a controller, though Tobias doesn't till much later in the book. Tobias is, 14, maybe 15 at this point in the series. About a year ago, he up and vanished without a trace, not showing up at school or any kind of establishment like a homeless shelter or juvenile detention. Yes, Tobias' aunt and uncle thought Tobias was with the other, but if de Groot didn't have a yerk in his head, he would have started up a proper legal investigation upon learning of Tobias' disappearance. And the moment Tobias walked into his office, he would more than likely try to detain Tobias until authorities could arrive. The only reasons he would not do that would be if he was an uncaring person, which he is not presenting himself as here, or if he had an ulterior motive to this whole will thing, which would only make sense if he was a controller. Anyway, de Groot tells Tobias that the deceased man he knew as his father was not his true genetic father, and that his real father left him a will to be read on Tobias' birthday, which is only a few days away. De Groot also describes Arya, who's been spending the last couple of years as a nature photographer in Africa. With that info dump, Tobias leaves, but the Animorphs scouting the scene spot a man following him, so Tobias has to dive through an Applebee's to avoid them. Once safe from the mysterious tracker, he demorphs back into Hawk and flies off. Below and behind, I saw a falcon I knew as Jake, and a harrier I knew as Cassie. Wait, Cassie and a harrier morph? Did she acquire another bird of prey morph? But that's breaking Animorph law! I should have met with the others. That was the plan. But once I was back in the sky, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to have to sit down and explain it all to them. I didn't want to have to deal with Cassie's hopefulness and Rachel's concern and Marco's abrasive skepticism. I didn't want it all analyzed and picked apart. I knew the routine. Cassie would make me go over everything, word by word, gesture by gesture, expression by expression. Cassie has an amazing talent for understanding other people and their motives. She would want to understand all she could about de Groot. Marco would be different. He would barely listen before he started zeroing in on all the problems and inconsistencies. Rachel would pace restlessly, angrily, looking for some way to make me safe, looking for some action to take. Jake would wait and listen calmly, and judge. I didn't want my friends thinking for me. I didn't want them to decide what I felt. I wanted to do it alone. This was mine. My problem. My hope. My choice. Well, again, it's hard to be sympathetic towards Tobias feeling like this is his problem, as his action in Megamorphs 2 shows that he has no idea what really qualifies as his problems and his choice. Let's make something clear. Even without all the baggage brought on by Megamorphs 2, Tobias is an emotionally unstable character. His history already includes probably getting himself trapped in Morph and attempted suicide, and since regaining his morphing abilities, he has become snarkier and more possessive. Tobias is in much greater need of his friends than ever before, because they are the only people, who offer any kind of anchorage, any kind of firm base for Tobias to stand on. So, instead of turning towards his friends, he turns towards a clan of bark-eating alien simpletons. Surely they'll understand his problems. Yes, to the Hork-Bajir colony we go, where we meet the Hork-Bajir seer, Toby, who has grown considerably since we last saw her in the Hork-Bajir Chronicles. Toby has bad news. One of the young Hork-Bajir named Beck has wandered out of the valley, and if he's captured by the Yeerks, he could lead them back. Oh, and by the way, in a moment of complete amnesia over the details of this book when I did my Hork-Bajir Chronicles review, I had stated that the Animorphs were capturing injured Hork-Bajir and starving the Yeerks out of them to populate the valley, which was incorrect. In actuality, the free Hork-Bajir have been doing their own scouting missions to a Yeerk establishment being constructed outside the city, where they've been capturing and freeing Hork-Bajir on their own. She waved an encompassing arm around the group.
How else have these Hork-Bajir come to freedom?
I guess I just assumed the Ellimist made it happen. Just goes to show you how fucked up the Animorphs' lives have become when magic is a legit answer to any question. Tobias realizes that the reason the Hork-Bajir have been freeing others is, well, among other things, they need a substantial size should the Yeerks be driven off the planet, and the Hork-Bajir find themselves at the mercy of the human race. The Animorphs have a meeting the next day and dole out responsibilities. Marco and Axe will check out news sources and try to pick up on the lead on any local alien sightings in the last 48 hours. Jake and Cassie will go into the woods and try to pick up Beck's scent, and Tobias and Rachel will scope out Arya and try to see what her deal is. Rachel is a beautiful girl. She's beautiful in that way you know will last her whole life. She'll be a beautiful woman. But beauty alone isn't that big a thing. What makes Rachel Rachel is what's inside. And watching her morph to eagle was like seeing her soul emerge through her flesh. Look, Rachel, you can't get pregnant while in bird morph. It's probably the safest sex there is. Was she more beautiful to me because she was a bird now? No, of course not. For one thing, eagles and hawks don't mate. For another, her eagle morph is male. Ah, screw it. I'll be a gay bird for you, Rachel. Tobias and Rachel fly over to Arya's hotel. Arya? Okay. And spy on her through her window. She seems legit enough. Has a tan, so she's been outside a lot. Has camera equipment lying around. Is wearing a dress that Rachel describes as a few years out of fashion, so she's probably been out of the loop. There's no sign, though, if she's in any way related to Tobias. Sometimes I wondered if this had all been an illusion, that I'd never had a mother and father, that I'd never really been human. I was a freak of nature. No, that wasn't right either. Nature at its most perverse could not create me. I was a freak of technology. Of alien technology. Arya gets a phone call and gets all excited, adjusting her hair as she leaves the hotel. She gets in a cab, and the two birds have to play a wild game of stay on top of a cop car and hope it follows the cab all the way to wherever it's going. I never win that game. And yes, the cop car follows the cab for over 2 miles to the airport, so either Rachel and Tobias have the dumbest luck ever, or the cops are controllers and keeping guard over... Well, I'll get to that. However, the cop car gets a call and starts going off in another direction, and looking for a new vehicle to pursue the cab, Tobias goes completely mental and grabs the underside of a helicopter taking off from the airport. Okay, beating up a hawk invading your territory is too hard, but freight hopping a helicopter mid-flight? Oh, that's no biggie. Well, it turns out the effort was for nothing, because the cab drops Arya off not a block away from the airport at Frank's Safari Land and Putt-Putt Golf, a crappy tourist trap that could only possibly wrangle the dumbest of tourists since it's right outside the airport. This isn't some highway rest stop. This place is advertising towards the jet-lagged, cranky passengers getting fresh off their flights. It's just a good thing Cassie isn't here. She hates these places. She hates these places. She'd have us go in there and free all the animals. It's right outside the airport. How does she not know about it already? Anywho, there's a sign outside in the establishment reading, "The Living Razor, Deadly Midget Freak." So either they have a really tiny Scott wolf in there, or we've stumbled onto Beck's location. Rachel protests doing insect morph to get in, and Tobias wants to have gay bird sex with her, so he comes up with the more complicated plan of stealing the toupee off the guy running the ticket booth to please her whims. They become human and slip inside. There they find Arya and the titular Frank looking at the star attraction, Beck, in an elevated cage.